HDR is finally fixed on the PlayStation 5. I mean, sort of, because we still have issues with HDR Black Libraries as in many other games. But the difference actually to many other games is it's very hard to fix here. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. As always, if you're new to my channel, please do me a big favor, like, share and subscribe. And now let's talk about HDR in Jedi on the PlayStation 5. And I'm going to do separate videos about the Xbox Series X and PC version because they're quite different actually, unfortunately. That's the problem, okay? So now we're starting with PlayStation 5, and very important is this HDR system level calibration menu on the PlayStation 5 is finally working as it should be. So and that means that there is no need after the latest patch that you increase the last page in this menu by 1 tick, or if you followed my recommendation back then, yeah, I recommend actually to increase this to the max and then use the internal settings to actually fine tune the game. But anyway, this is not needed anymore, not recommended anymore at all. So what I would do is make sure you follow actually the instruction, or you follow my recommendation, because I would actually recommend to increase the sun until you can't see it anymore, because then you have the maximum peak brightness of your TV. If you would follow the instruction on the screen and you would set it up that you barely can't see it, then you actually under track your maximum peak brightness slightly. So make sure you can't see the sun on the first two screens at all, and then on the last screen on the for the black level setting, make sure this is set to the absolute minimum. And this is very important, because if you would just increase this setting by 1 tick, then you would add additional HDR Black Libraries in games what are supporting this menu actually. So make sure that this button here is actually grayed out and you're good to go. And of course I verified that the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5 is actually working. So I have set up the PlayStation 5 for my LG G2 with a maximum peak brightness of around 1000 nits, and in specular highlights like the sun I had a maximum peak brightness of around 980 nits, which of course fits the LG G2 perfectly. And just to verify, I set up the PlayStation 5 HDR menu in the complete wrong way. I decreased all the values to the absolute minimum, and then I had in specular highlights like that, similar specular highlights, a maximum peak brightness of around 100 nits, which of course is a terrible picture. Okay, but now it's time to talk about the internal settings from the game, and we have actually two. So of course make sure that HDR output is set to on. I don't even know or understand why we have actually the option when we have set up HDR on the PlayStation 5. This shouldn't be there in my opinion, okay? Anyway, we have HDR brightness setting, we have HDR settings, HDR brightness setting and the HDR black point setting. So at this very moment here, I would not recommend that you change the HDR black point setting, because what I found is, and this is really weird because this game actually drives me crazy in terms of HDR Black Libraries, because especially when you play or when you have a mission in caves or whatever, there is a lot of HDR Black Libraries. Absolutely terrible, to be very honest. So, but there's no way that I was able to fix this without having Black Level crush somewhere else, okay? So I decided at some point we leave this as it is at 50, and we're playing with the FineTune dark area settings or the brightness on the TV. And I will talk about this in a minute. So what I would recommend again, HDR Black Level point, leave it at 50 on the LG OLED TV. So I tested this on the LG G2 and my CX, so it is actually really good. And now we're talking about the HDR brightness setting. So I would not recommend to decrease this, okay? So do not decrease this, because this setting is also affecting the maximum peak brightness, unfortunately. But it also, of course, affects the overall brightness of the screen. So what I found is between 50 and 75, it's still okay for me. But keep in mind, the further you increase this, the more of a washed out picture you get at some point, okay? So between 50 and 75, in my opinion, is nice way to go, let's say like this. But also keep in mind, with 75, we're not talking about maximum peak brightness of 1000 nits in specular highlights. like the sun. So we have now suddenly around 1200 nits, which of course leads a little bit to clipping in specular highlights. So this is something what you need to consider. If you can, if you're happy with the picture, leave all the settings here, which I'm going to show you again. Leave all the settings here at 50. This is my recommendation at the moment. And of course, use HDR. Okay, so let's talk about HDR Black Libraries in this game, which drives me crazy. And yes, we have a lot of HDR Black Libraries, unfortunately, but also on the other hand, HDR Black Level Crush. So I don't know what to do actually. But most of the time, it's really annoying actually when you're in a cave like this here. And I know my camera can't show this right now, but let's say when we go in a very dark area or dark corner, then, and I tested this of course, there is almost zero information from the game. So that means you should have a complete black screen, but this is not the case at all. And I'm very sure my camera can't catch this, but I can see even with all the lights on here right now, I can see this is all grayish. Okay, maybe you can see a little bit of texture here, and of course him a little bit, but almost no information. Okay, so even you increase all the brightness in internal settings or on the TV, there's no information. So what I try to achieve here is actually to have proper OLED blacks, but it's not possible, because if I would do this, then in a different location or in different levels or whatever, you have HDR Black Level Crush. So what I would recommend here is actually play with the FineTune dark area settings if available, because this is my recommended way. So on the LG OLED TVs, of course, it's quite simple. So you must make sure that you turn on VRR, okay? Because without this option turned on, the FineTune dark area settings are not working at all, okay? In not a single game, okay? So this is very important. But all what you have to do then, go to Game Optimizer and be reducing the FineTune dark area settings to -16, okay? Roughly -16. Maybe you like -14, -18 better, but I found -16 is actually a nice value where you have, yeah, not so much HDR Black Libraries and you're also not crushing too much, okay? So don't do, or how should I say, don't combine the brightness setting on your TV with the FineTune dark area settings, okay? So leave the setting on the brightness at the standard setting, like 50, if you use the FineTune dark area settings. If you don't use the FineTune dark area settings, then decrease this value to around 42, okay? But again, you either use the FineTune dark area settings or the brightness setting, okay? Don't combine both of them, because you end up with terrible black level crush. And of course we have the question, HDR dynamic tone mapping on or dynamic tone mapping off. And yeah, forget about dynamic tone mapping off, because it will just, yeah, not give you a very nice experience in this game. And yeah, what I would recommend is actually use HDR if available, because this game supports the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5. So there is no point in my opinion, and yeah, brightness also is fine. So there's no point to use dynamic tone mapping on, because in, yeah, especially in caves, dynamic tone mapping on, as you can see here right now when I'm changing this, it is just way too bright, way too bright. And of course I know that there is the question also, if we're now changing between HDR and dynamic tone mapping on, and yeah, we have the fact that this game supports the HDR system level calibration, do we need to actually calibrate then the PlayStation with dynamic tone mapping on to have a proper comparison? So, I mean, I have done this and I can show you this, and still the experience what I had with dynamic tone mapping on and with the, yeah, calibration done with dynamic tone mapping on the PlayStation 5 was just not as good as with HDR. So that's why my recommendation is for this game, use HDR. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this very quick video. HDR settings in Jedi. I actually like the picture quality. So that's the 30 FPS mode, okay? So I'm not even bothering with the 60 FPS mode at the moment, and this comes from me. And I hate 30 FPS, but it's really interesting that at some point you get used to it. Even, I have to admit, the 30 FPS mode in this game is far better than in other games in terms of motion blur and stuff like that. I actually can live with it, but it's still, it's 30 FPS. Anyway, I'm looking into the performance for this patch at some point as well, but what I have seen so far, there was literally no improvement. Okay, so the 60 FPS mode is still terrible in my opinion, and my recommendation right now is actually use the 30 FPS mode, even it's just 30 FPS, but it offers a more constant experience actually. So the 60 FPS mode is just stuttering all the time, you have this terrible screen tearing on the top, and the 30 FPS mode is just much better in terms of that. But anyway, I hope there will be, or there are a couple of fixes in terms of performance coming soon, hopefully. But I don't know about this actually. I don't know if we just need to take it as it is. But anyway, that's for this video. Thank you very much. If you have any concerns or questions or whatever, put in the comment section, and I'm trying to answer it. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.